in the Army.
Awesome. Glad to hear it. So, in your biological data form that you filled out, you said that you were born in Peru.
That's correct, yes. I was born in Peru and educated in Peru. When I came to this country, I was already a doctor, I was already a surgeon, and I came for further training and also kind of a, kind of romantic story. I was coming to marry a beautiful American girl that I met in Peru, but I was from the United States.
Oh,
So that was my the way that I got to in this country.
Very cool. So when did you come to America?
Well, that was in 1968.
So that's only 1 year before your service started, is that correct?
Yes, as a matter of fact, that was a kind of an interesting situation. When I came here to this country, I was told that maybe I was going to be eligible to the draft, because at that time there was a draft. So I asked in the American Embassy if that is correct, and they checked my papers, and they told me, no, you are okay because you are over 26. 26 was the limit for to be drafted. So I came here and I got married and I started my second training in Chicago in one of the big medical centers. And then 1 year later, I got this draft notice that I've been drafted in the Army. And I wasn't an American citizen yet, but I was an immigrant.
Right.
You know? So I went to say, I think this is a mistake. And they checked my papers and they said, well, the 26 is for the GIs, for the guys that are going to be there with the M16 doing the fighting. But for doctors, it's 35. Or even in a case like that was at that time, in a national emergency, if you are a doctor and if you are standing up and breathing, you are eligible to come.
Oh yeah.
But they give me the option and said, but you are not an American citizen yet, so you can refuse, but in that case you have to go back to your country and then probably never come back again.
Right.
So I couldn't take that, you know. I was married, I have in the middle of my second training, so I said, well, okay, I'll volunteer to go.
Definitely.
And that's the way I went.
So what was it like growing up in Peru?
Well, it was a completely different culture. You know, I was a typical professional, and my family also was, my dad also was in the medical profession. So I was typical middle class, and then I came to this country and it was really a cultural shock, you know, it's different. And I was very, very poor. I came here to this country, I sold a little Volkswagen car that I have, all my medical books in Spanish, and I came in this country with $3,000 and my medical diploma under my arm. And then to find a new life and to see what was going to happen. And that was the way I started. So it was very difficult. And then also I have the challenge of the language, of course. Mm-hmm. You know, I was able to speak English, but you know, it's not easy, especially when you are already old and try to learn a new language. But I still my training, and then I have to go to the Army.
Yeah, right.
Yes, and it was an incredible situation. So I had to go what's called the boot camp for doctors. So they sent me to San Antonio, Texas, and to be involved in the Army. And so they learned us how to salute, all kind of things. You know, that for doctors was kind of a joke for us to be in the Army all of a sudden. But anyway, and then they decided that we were 300 new doctors coming in my class. And for those doctors, there were several from different countries. So it was like I was telling my wife, that was like the Foreign Legion. But anyway, but the American Army. So, and then decided that, especially the surgeons, we were going to be groomed to do the different surgery, which is the combat surgery, the trauma cases, the burns, all the very horrendous situations. They were getting ready for us to send us to Vietnam. And so I spent 1 year in California and in Texas being groomed and getting more a training in combat surgery. And after that, I got my orders to go to Vietnam, and I went to Vietnam.
Sure, yeah. And so you joined in 96, a year after you came to America.
Right. Yeah.
So was there anybody else other than your wife that you left behind when you left for the service?
Well, of course, it was a terrible family situation, you know. As a matter of fact, when I was going to leave to Vietnam, my wife was 8 months pregnant. And I begged the army to let me stay here for a couple of months. And I said, you know, I'm willing to stay my time in the army, but and say, no, this is not the Boy Scouts, you know, this is the army, and we need you there, and you have to go. So I had to go. So it was very difficult. And but you know, I said, well, I am a doctor. I probably am going to be in the hospital, you know, and besides, the government was telling us that we were winning the war. So I said, well, I think it's going to be like a Boy Scout camp, but it wasn't. So I arrived to Vietnam in one of those big planes, and my first impression was, after 20 hours flying, that the pilot said, well, we have good news and bad news for you. The good news is that very good weather in Saigon, but the bad news is that the airport is under red alert. They are getting rockets. So we are going to have kind of an emergency landing. So it was not that really, you know, an approach, like, no, that was bang, arriving there. And they say, and then you forget about all your belongings, you get out of the plane, run outside, and get into the bunkers. So, oh my God, this is the war.
Right.
Yes. So that was my beginning. And then I got my assignment. And because I already have surgical experience, I was drafted to the army, and I was a major of the United States Army. And most of the American doctors, they were captains because they were younger than I was. So I got a BA major. And at the beginning, they didn't send me to a hospital. They sent me as a battalion surgeon. I was in command of a whole battalion in the middle of the jungle. And my little hospital or medical facility was underground because we were getting rockets, and that was the war. And I said, oh my God, this is really a war. And the war is the most horrendous thing that you can see.
I'm sure.
So I was there for practically 4 months, and then something happened that I was called to the headquarters of the American Division. That was my unit, and they told me that because I was a major, I was supposed to be in the command for 2 weeks because the colonels, they got malaria and they had to be evacuated. So I was the big hunch for 2 weeks. But anyway, fortunately, I didn't know what I was doing. I found myself like in the movies, you know, being in the war rooms with the maps and saying, oh, we are going to send here and there. And I learned that we were in Cambodia and Laos. It was really serious.
Yeah.
But I survived that, but I already met people, and I said, you know, I am a surgeon. I would like to go to really a big hospital. And they did. They sent me to the 91st Evac Hospital, which was a big evacuation hospital in an area. You know, there were the MASH units. The MASH units, they were the hospitals. They can be moved geographically according to the needs. They were very, very good hospitals because we were prepared to treat the really critically wounded patients. And we have all the specialties, you know, and it was a very, very demanding work. But of course, unfortunately, we were very, very busy. So I started working there. I was there for 1 more year. Being the surgeon in the war, it was a very incredible and really very difficult experience. You know, dealing with the young people, 18, 19-year-old kids that were coming, dying or without limbs, and very serious. And those poor kids, sometimes even they didn't know why they were fighting for. You know, that was a very unpopular war, and everybody was drafted, so they had to be there. So it was very very difficult.
Definitely.
And sometimes there were doctors that they couldn't take it. I don't know, and they had to be relief of command. But I was lucky enough to make it well, and I work very well, and I have very good training in Peru previously, and then in California also. I was for my previous year in the army. I was in another hospital, so I have a lot of experience,
Sure.
and so I became very efficient, and it was very rewarding for the doctors and for me in my case to have the satisfaction that we're trying to help people and we save a lot of lives. But it was very hard. And during that time, I was involved in doing some volunteer work. When I was going to Vietnam, my wife's father, he was a veteran too. He was in the Navy before in World War II. And as a matter of fact, he was in an aircraft carrier that was kamikaze by the Japanese and that kind of stuff. And my wife also was born when he was in war. Mm. And my son was born when I was in Vietnam. And that was some kind of a very interesting, a very happy situation for me to learn that he was born, but also very sadly because I wasn't there. I was in the operating room.
Right.
And a nurse came. They said, "Dr. Pepper, the Red Cross informed us that you have a boy and the son and the wife they're doing very well." And everybody in the operating room started jumping and, "Oh, congratulations!" Yeah. But being a war surgeon in a hospital that was also, according to the Geneva Convention, the hospitals, they don't supposed to be bombed but as a matter of fact, as a joke, I remember asking this one, and the doctors, when we were out, we had to have a pistol, and said we're not supposed to carry arms according to the Geneva Convention. But they said, well, the Geneva Convention probably is good in Geneva, but not here in Vietnam. That was kind of a joke of the answer. But, well, fortunately I was able to survive, and I was involved in also, at that time, the Vietnam War, even that they were telling us that we were winning the war, but we were not winning. We were losing the war. And they began to a stage that's called the Vietnamization of the war. So we're supposed to, the American army was supposed to be coming home and giving the responsibilities to the Vietnamese army. So that was the Vietnamization of the war, but didn't work well, obviously. And in order to be trying to help, they advised us to go and do some voluntary work. And I did the voluntary work. I found a little village that they have a Vietnamese hospital. They didn't have anything. So I used to go there and I did some surgery there. I borrow instruments from our hospital, and we given away also instruments and also blood. We use a lot of blood, but in that time and even now, you cannot use the blood for more than 21 days. After 21 days, you have to be discarded that blood. It's not good anymore, and then got another one. But in Vietnam it was okay. After the 21 days, it's still good. So I was bringing some blood to that Vietnamese hospital and doing surgery, and doing what I call real surgery, not war surgery, but just doing operations of different people with the gallbladders and all the normal surgery.
Right.
So it was very rewarding. But I have to go with my pistol and two of my soldiers, to guard me, and with the jeep, and it was difficult.
Definitely.
And my wife's dad, he told me, Anibal, do a good job, but don't volunteer for anything. but I ended up volunteering in all kinds of things. And also I had to fly in helicopters, and that was very dangerous, because being in an helicopter there, it was just like being a sitting duck there. Fortunately, nothing happened to me, and I came back in one piece. And coming back home was terrific to see my family. My son was already 11 months old. It was a wonderful family situation. And yeah, during my time in Vietnam, my wife, she went to live with her parents. So my son was born in Wisconsin, as a matter of fact. And it was, there were 2 years in the Army. I am very proud of being a vet, but also I am very anti-war and anti-military now, because war is the most horrendous thing that can happen to humanity.
Yes.
Yes, it's very, very serious.
Definitely. And so you were with the U.S. Army Medical Corps.
I was in the medical corps for 2 years. And then when I came back, they gave me the option to stay in the army, resign, or resign my commission. So I decided to resign my commission, and I continued with my training.
Oh.
So I went back to my training in Chicago. I finished my training very successfully, and I was a very well-trained surgeon. That after all, the war experience was very good for my hands and for my surgical experience. And then after I finished my training, I started my private practice of surgery in Chicago, in one of the suburbs in Chicago. And I was very successful. So, some of my friends told me that really I was a poster boy for the American dream. A guy, but fortunately with a very good education when I came here. But I came and I had to work very, very hard to reach the point that I was able to become a surgeon in Chicago, which is a very competitive place. Chicago has like 8 medical schools, and there are famous doctors from all over the world, so you have to compete with them. And to being a foreigner, sometimes that makes it even more difficult to do that. But I made it, and I have the blessing that I have a wonderful family. My wife was very, very supportive in all my career. I have 3 children. Michael, who was born when I was in Vietnam, and then Elizabeth, who is now also a doctor now, and Alison, the youngest, which is also a social worker. And then, when I came here to this country, I realized that I married Crystal Lake. My wife, she used to come, my wife's grandfather from Chicago, they discovered this area. Wow. And so they started coming, and so my wife came all her life to Crystal Lake. They have a cottage in Frankfurt and in Crystal Lake. And so when I became member of the family, I started coming here for my vacations. And then when retirement time came for me, I decided to retire here. We have a land there in Crystal Lake, and we built a house, and here we are talking with you.
Yes, that's very awesome. So
I think it's interesting. A little bit different of my life is that I wasn't an American. But of course, after I finished my army, I became an American citizen, and now I am a very proud American citizen.
During your service, was it ever hard or difficult with like a language barrier or anything when talking to other soldiers?
My first year in this country was very difficult, but then I fortunately I was able to pick up the language, and the medical terms, the medical English is not easy, not too much difficult for me, because all the words they come from Latin or Greek, so they are very similar.
Sure.
So getting better and better. But the first year was very serious.
Yes.
Until one day I realized that I have dreams, and I dream in English. So that means that your brain is already thinking, in English.
Definitely.
Because at the beginning, you think still in your mother tongue. If I see that's a chair, and it's a silla in Spanish. Silla is a chair, and then you translate it. But when you see something then and you say that's a chair, that your brain is already functioning in English.
Definitely. So what was the hardest part of your military training?
Well, the most difficult thing was to be away from my family and be in a place that was dangerous. Even that we were in the hospitals, but still we were in the middle of the war. And I have experiences of treating patients very, very serious situations. And I have one anecdote that maybe is kind of interesting. I took care of a soldier that he had a minor injury in his leg, but nothing serious, but it was a grenade or something that skirl. And I suture, I clean it up, and when I was doing that, he saw my name and it said Major Pepper, and he tells me, "I am a Pepper too." I said, "What do you mean?" That his name was Pepper. His name was Larry Pepper. So that was kind of an interesting situation. So I kept him in the hospital for a few days. I sutured his wound, and then later on I sent him back to his unit because he still was okay to keep in his unit. So like maybe 3 or 4 months later, okay, I can't remember exactly, I was in the hospital doing my duty. One of the we took turns, all the surgeons, to be the officer of the day. That means that there's a chief surgeon in the emergency room. So you have to make decisions of life and death. And you have to decide this patient is going to be operated right away, or this patient is not going to be operated, that kind of stuff. And I was working that, and one of the nurses, in panic, she calls me and said, "Dr. Pepper, come here, come here." Because she was taking care of the patient, and his name was Larry Pepper. And she thought that maybe it was relative from me or something like that. And right away I said, "No, it's nothing," but it was the same Larry Pepper that I already took care of him. But this time he came with a bullet in his head and was practically dead or dying. And but I lost it, Even I tried to do mouth-to-mouth resuscitation to him, to save him. And then the neurosurgeon came and he said, "Dr. Pepper, no, he's practically dead." And I never will forget his 2 eyes open. When you die, your pupils dilated, so they are big, and they don't react. And I tried to close his eyes and didn't close. So still I see those eyes sometimes in the middle of the night.
Yeah, I'm sure. And that must have been very, very difficult.
Yeah, it was very difficult.
So, if there was any easiest part of training with your previous medical training, was that easy to kind of get back into the military medical training?
Well, after the military training, I went back to the normal type of medicine or surgery, and it was a wonderful change, to be operating people that, well, they need surgery, but they were not dying or without a leg or something like that. I had the experience that I gained in the operating room in Vietnam. They were tremendous. The hospitals, they were prepared to really treat those terrible patients. But we have all the equipment and the instruments and the means to treat them. I operated with a patient that he had a quadruple amputation or something like that, and I had to remove part of his liver, and we used 22 units of blood on him. We took a 4 hours operation and we saved it. And then another thing that we had to do there, all the surgeons, we took turns to take patients, to evacuate patients, because a hospital in Vietnam, we have to, as soon as the patient was stable, we have to get him out of the hospital and take him to another hospital, take him to Japan. So all the surgeons, we took turns to go in big planes, 2 surgeons and 4 nurses with 40 patients, fly from Vietnam to Japan, to Tokyo, to leave the patients there in different hospitals, and then come back. Because at the hospital, always we had to have empty beds to get more of the incoming wounded.
Mm-hmm.
So I went 7 times. I went from Vietnam to Japan, bringing patients. It was a very stressful 4 hours being with 40 patients, a great responsibility, but then we leave the patients there, and it was in a way a good break for us, because then we stay at least 1 day in Tokyo,
Sure.
Having a flushing toilet and being like a normal guy, because our accommodations in Vietnam, they were difficult. We have what we call the hooches. We have electricity, we have everything, but not at the standards that we would like to.
Yes. During your training, is there a certain memory that sticks out above all the others?
Well, the training, we had to make difficult changes, because in the war you are dealing with very badly contaminated wounds. So if you have an amputated leg, you cannot close it. You have to do what's called the guillotine amputation. So you practically get the limb out, and then you leave it open. And then you have to wait, and then when the infection is under control, and then you can close it. And also you cannot use all the grafts to reconstruct an artery. Mm-hmm. You cannot leave a foreign body in the body if it's contaminated. So there were very different ways to treat the patients there.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So, what was it like serving in Vietnam? Just in that completely different area than like California or Texas,
Yes.
like where you were training.
Yes. To begin with, the weather in Vietnam was very, very bad sometimes. They had the monsoons, very, very hot, and rains. It's a tropical country. But the most difficult thing was you had to accommodate those circumstances. But fortunately, it's amazing how the body can react. And after 2 months there, we were 112 degrees and very humid, and we had to function. In the operating room, we used to have air conditioning, and also in the intensive care unit. But otherwise, that was very stressful.
Definitely. So, like, being a surgeon, was there ever a normal day, or each day?
Well, we try to have a normal days, but we have also to make some kind of a adjustments. You have to dehumanize yourself a little bit, in a way that if I was operating with a little kid, a 19-year-old kid, just do the job without thinking, oh my God, I'm cutting the leg of this kid and his mother, and what's going to happen? So you cannot dehumanize yourself and just do the job. Sometimes we were operating for 20 hours in a row, depending how many patients we have. And because if there was a battle close to our hospital, all those patients were going to come to us. And we were prepared to treatment. But sometimes you were exhausted. And then you had to go and sleep for 4 hours. Have some coffee and come back again and do that kind of thing. And in my case, besides being a surgeon in my hospital, also I became kind of the tropical disease specialist, because my training in Peru is also a tropical country. So I knew a lot of tropical medicine that the American doctors, they didn't know how to treat malaria or something like that. And I was very good at that. So I was a consultant. So sometimes the lab, they will call me to take a look in the microscope and decide what kind of parasite was that, what kind of malaria. Because in malaria, there are 3 kinds. One of the kinds is very serious, and you have to make the diagnosis and treat the patient different, and we have to evacuate that patient to Saigon or something like that. So I was doing that. But also, that was the camaraderie, It's amazing how people that we are working in such pressure, you become so friends. People, after 2 weeks, you were like you met them for all life.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff.
Definitely. Did you make any long-time friends during
Yes,
service?
certainly. We make a lot, several very good friendships. And to the point that maybe years later, during a big surgical meeting in Chicago or in San Francisco, we'll decide to have a meeting of all the surgeons from Vietnam,
Yes.
of the people that we know, and we go there and we talk. And another of the things that happened to me is that finally I went to the Vietnam Memorial in Washington, and it is something very, very wonderful to be there, but very sad and very moving. In Vietnam, they died 64,000 American soldiers, and for those 60,000 dead, 4 died in my hands. And I knew the names, and I went to find those names in the wall, especially the name of Larry Pepper. And we did. So for me, it was very moving, and still fortunately I didn't come with any disability or something. I was perfectly normal. I am perfectly normal. But once in a while, I woke up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat, and seeing those eyes of Larry Pepper.
Yes. So how did your service change you? Like how emotionally or mentally?
Well, as I said, when I came to Vietnam, I came with a broken heart, and it took me several years to really heal that broken heart. Now I am very proud of my service in the Army, and I became, an American citizen, and also helped me in understand life and death, and appreciate how life it is, and how much we take it for granted. As a Peruvian, also I have the blessing that I go back to my country every year. For the last 45 years, I've been in Peru every year. And also I go with group of doctors to do some medical care in Peru, some pro bono job. And as a matter of fact, in 3 days, I'm going to Peru, and I'm going to be going with a group of 3 plastic surgeons to work in a burn unit in Peru. A burn unit that I started 35 years ago. And now is the best burn unit in the country. And, as a general surgeon, I knew about burns, but in one of my trips to Peru, talking with my former chief, I asked him how the burns are doing here. And I said, no good. We don't have a burn unit, and if the patient has more than 30% of the body burned, probably they're going to die. And I said, well, that's unacceptable. You know, we are saving patients with 60 or 70 or 80%. And I said, well, we don't have the instruments and we don't have the burn unit. And I said, okay, give me a physical plant in the hospital. Give me a little room in the hospital, and I'm going to start a burn unit. And I did, 36 years ago. And ever since, I go with a group of surgeons, and we bring equipment, and it's now a referral center in Peru, one of the referral centers in Peru. It's like the Mayo Clinic of Peru for burn patients.
Wow.
So, and the Army was the one that gave me the training for burns, and I became a specialist in burns. So still I do that.
That's awesome. During your service, how did you stay in touch with your family back home?
Well, at that time, of course, there was not internet and nothing. I used to send cassettes and letters. We wrote letters. I wrote letters practically every day to my wife. And I have all those letters, and now I am writing my memoirs.
Mm.
So in those letters, of course, in those letters, I never told my wife that how bad we were. I just told her, oh, we are having one time, oh, we went to the beach, because we used to have a beach close to our hospital. And so I sent the pictures of the beach and having a great time. And also, I am a tennis player. And I was a very good tennis player. And my wife also played tennis. And we built a tennis court in my hospital. I learned that the director of my CEO of the hospital was a very good a tennis player. And I said, hey, John, how about if we build a tennis court? Because that will be very good for the morale of the surgeons. Instead of drinking beer in the officers club, we go and play tennis. And he thought it was a good idea. So we got the Army of Engineers, the civies, and we got cement, and we got everything, and we built the tennis court. And since we were going to Japan, all the surgeons, we got rackets and nets, and we have a tennis. So we play tennis. We play a tournament, and we play what we call the Open Vietnam Tournament. And surgeons from different hospitals, they used to come in helicopters to play tennis in the Vietnam Open.
Wow.
And I ended up winning the the Vietnam Open.
That's definitely an accomplishment. So other than like tennis and going to the beach, what else did you do?
Well, I have several hobbies. One of my hobbies is, besides the tennis, I fly radio control airplanes. That is a good hobby. I love it. And I do a lot of photography. And as a matter of fact, I print a calendar every year that I sell my calendar to obtain funds for my mission work. And this year, I already got $25,000 selling my calendar. I should bring one of my calendars, but I'll give you one of my calendars. And so I have my photography, my tennis, music. I love now all the outdoors, walking, and it's good for my health too.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Do you remember anything particularly funny or humorous that you'd like to share during your service?
I'm sure I can think of something. Let me see. Well, one time in Vietnam, one of my friends, the pilots of the helicopters, they said, "Hey, Dr. Pepper, I want to take you for a ride in my helicopter to do the shark patrol." And I said, "What is the shark patrol?" And they have a beach there, and they were using like for R&R, but they have sharks. So an helicopter was flying there, checking for sharks, and the water was very crystal, beautiful. So you will see the sharks.
Sure.
If you see a shark, you say, "Get ready out," and with the machine gun they will get the shark. That kind of stuff.
Was there anything that you did for good luck during your service? Anything or any superstitions that you had?
No, I didn't have any superstitions. I always have the picture of my children and my wife and my wallet. And of course, we have to carry our tag dog, with dog tag, with your name and that kind of thing. That still I have it. And whenever I'm flying in a commercial now, still I wear my dog tag.
Yes, definitely.
So they can identify me if something happens.
Right. So, I mean, obviously your name of Dr. Pepper, did anyone comment on it at all?
Oh, yes. It was funny. As I mentioned, my name was Pepper and I became famous. But I didn't know anything about this. So when I came to this country, my first day in the hospital, I was an intern, and I had my name there. I went to the elevator and everybody was seeing my name and laughing at me. And I said, why they are laughing at me? Maybe because my color or what, And then finally somebody told me about this Dr. Pepper business, the Dr. Pepper pop. I said, well, okay. And a few months later, we were in the supermarket with my wife in the parking lot, and I saw a big sign of Dr. Pepper. And I said, okay, why don't you take a picture of me with that background? So she took a picture. And I said it to my dad in Peru that he was Dr. Pepper.
Yeah. Right.
So I sent him my picture and said, Dad, 4 months and I'm already famous in this country. So that was a good laugh. He make it in a large and he had it. He hanging in his office. Oh, my son is famous in the United States. That was kind of a joke.
Definitely. So if you could sum it up all, what was the best part of your service?
The best part of my service is to think that I think with my hands and my knowledge I was able to save lives. And of course, I understand that my service was completely different at the really the fighting people, My mission in Vietnam was not to kill, was to save. So I think in that regard, I feel very happy that I was able to do that. Nothing better for a doctor than to have a family or a patient say, thank you very much, God bless you. And that's the best thing that a doctor can.
Definitely.
Hear.
Sure. So now kind of going into the end of your service, do you remember the specific day that your service ended?
Well, when I came back from Vietnam, it was also kind of interesting. We were flying from Vietnam to San Francisco. We went in jungle fatigues, Vietnam was 112. And for some reason, they told us that before getting to San Francisco, we had to land in Anchorage, Alaska, to refueling. And something happened with the plane, so we had to spend the night there. So we arrived going home, I'm going home, and then we landed, and in Alaska was minus 41. So from 112 to minus 41, they brought blankets and we had to put the blanket and run to the hangar. But finally we get to San Francisco, and then I took my plane to go to back home to see my son. So the date was January 31st. And I arrived to Appleton, Wisconsin, and there was my wife and my son. I think that was the beginning of my broken heart healing.
Definitely, definitely. So, what was your ending rank?
Pardon me?
What was your ending rank when you left the service? Like your highest rank?
I was a major.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Uh, Usually, if I would have stayed in the army, probably in another 2 years I could have made it colonel or something like that. But I was not interested in the military life.
Definitely.
I was proud of being in the army, but I was very happy to get out of the army too.
Yes. Yes. So how long did you stay in Wisconsin?
In Wisconsin, right away we moved again to Chicago because for me to continue my training.
Sure.
Yes. So I spent practically 40 years in Chicago, and I was very successful in my practice, especially for a foreigner surgeon. It's not easy. I never really felt discriminated, but the competition was there. So, and my experience of Vietnam helped me tremendously. So I started working in my hospital, but when a young surgeon goes to a hospital, nobody knows you, so nobody's going to send you patients. So you have to prove yourself. So I started working in the emergency room. And I proved and I became very famous because I became the bullet doctor. So all the police and Chicago was sometimes worse than Vietnam. They have a lot of gunshot wounds and that kind of stuff. So I was taking care of those. So in my hospital, I had the reputation of being a very good, excellent surgeon. So they started sending me patients, and they made me chief of the emergency room in my hospital.
Wow.
And then later on, like a year later, they asked me they named me to be chairman of the intensive care, the surgical intensive care, which is a very prestigious and very difficult job, but I was able to do it. And 5 years later, I became chairman of the whole department of surgery in my hospital.
Wow.
So for a little Peruvian kid, that I was, that was also kind of funny. I was a first lieutenant of the Peruvian Reserve Army. And the United States, I became a major of the United States Army. So I was able to finish my career as being the surgeon, the chairman of the surgical department of the Westlake Community Hospital, which was a hospital in connection with the Loyola Medical Hospital unit.
And so, once you returned home, how were you received by your family and community?
Oh, well, for the family I was received with open arms, of course, although unfortunately the Vietnam War was a very unpopular war, and we never had a parade or anything like that. As a matter of fact, that was the opposite. Never really happened to me, but some of my friends, they told me that even they didn't want to wear the uniform when they went back home, because they will say, oh, you are in Vietnam, that was no good. But no, I didn't felt that. But it was wonderful to be back home.
Yes.
And another thing that was also wonderful was for my family in Peru. My parents, they can you imagine how very stressful it was for them knowing that their kid was fighting a war in Vietnam, and he was going to come back.
Yes, right.
Yeah, that was one of the things. When my last time that I went to Peru, I went to see my parents, and I told them, I'm going to go to Vietnam, but I tried to say, well, it's going to be okay. But I knew that they were really suffering.
Yeah.
And so a few months later, after I came back, 1 year later, I went back to Peru to visit them. And I've been going to Peru ever since, every year.
That's awesome. So
I have the best of two worlds.
Yes.
Here in Frankfurt and Crystal Lake, and also I go to Peru, and it's a beautiful country, and I can do some work there.
Yes. So was the army able to pay for your secondary training as your surgeon?
Yes, I got the what's called the GI Bill. For 2 years, I got $400 a month
Wow.
for 2 years. So I finished my training. And when I came to my training, when I left my training, I was starting my second year. And when I came back, they gave me 1 year credit. So I put them in the third.
That's awesome.
Yes. So.
All right. So, do you think that the service made you better?
Well, probably made me better surgeon, technically. And also, well, I think it was very important part of my surgical training and surgical career.
Yes. So, kind of wrapping up, do you have any questions for me?
Well, I congratulate you the things that you are doing. I think this is part of history, and unfortunately, yeah, more. Now I am 80 years old, so there are not too many people also from Vietnam that are very young. And I think history is very important because we have to learn from history. Because sometimes I think that, my guys, we don't learn about from history, and we do it again and again.
Yes. And so, and you brought some photos, is that right?
Yeah, I have some of the pictures that I can share with you. I can, you will see the tragedy of the war and a different culture and something that now sometimes you see in TV, but this is the real thing.
All right. Well, then let's.
Well, it was a pleasure talking to you.
Yes, you
and
as well.
maybe you can make a good report out of this.
Yes. Thank you.